Chantel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having
No,
me.
it's great. I'm so glad that we were able to work this out and have you here. So let's just jump right into the show.
Awesome.
What career did you want to do when you were in grade school, high school, and college?
I wanted to be a lawyer.
Straight off. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer all day, every day.
What
Just
about law drew you?
justice.
Mm.
Advocating for. I feel what I'm coming to learn about myself now. It's more. It's about the underdog. It's about
Mm-hmm.
the forgotten one, the one that quickly gets passed over and judged over about things, and just letting there be like that correction. We see this, these scales and this balance, and it's just like, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, does that we right now what we kind of like are dealing with is the imbalance,
Yeah.
so our scales of justice are not very much a balanced type of that figure of what they created is not really living out in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always wanted to be able to represent the underdog, someone who, needed a voice, needed like someone to advocate for them because they didn't have the ability to do it for themselves. So, just reestablishing what justice would really be for someone.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so before we get into all of the roles that you have now, because you have a bunch of them, what
Yeah.
job did you do before you started these roles?
Well, concurrently, I am a registered nurse. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
work in a factory. I've done some
Yeah.
things. Yeah, but concurrently with what I'm doing, I am a registered nurse.
Mm-hmm. And so, but you're also a death doula and a doula,
I am a death doula, a bereavement doula,
doula
end
and
of life doula,
and
however you want to
so then
connect that.
how did you go into from wanting to be a lawyer to an RN?
So, in the midst of all of that, I went from wanting to be a lawyer to once I started working in a factory, I decided I wanted to become an engineer. So, I was in school for mechanical engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this thing called trigonometry. Um, that was just not for my life. And it made me think about this. But actually, what really truly happened, it became a calling. So, my mother was a heart transplant patient.
Mm-hmm.
And through the process of her waiting to get a heart transplant, there were a lot of things that she had to go through, frequent hospitalizations. She had to get like an IV that she was able to get administered at home, to get medications to help her heart be strong, to continue to pump in. So when the home care nurses and they were planning this, they were like, well, who will help her, like get this, like changing the medication and cleaning the lines and everything. And I was like, I'll totally
Yeah.
like help do that. So through that process and just spending that time with her and seeing how like healthcare professionals interacted and treated her,
Mm-hmm.
I one day I was laying in bed and it was like I feel like it was that moment that I got called and said, no, you should be a nurse. And literally, I was supposed to be starting a semester in school that fall, and I went and I changed my whole program from mechanical engineering to nursing. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, so that became the journey to becoming that nurse.
So when you were a nurse, then what brought you to doula work? Like what field in nursing did you get into?
Well, I the first experience that I had, I did it was kind of like a preceptor program. It
Okay.
was a
Mm-hmm.
program through what they call so it was like my second to last clinical
Okay.
in nursing school, and had an opportunity to go and do like a clinical at Ruth Hospice. Initially, I wanted to do it because of the fact that I didn't have to have a clinical instructor there. So it was kind of like
Yes.
I could just be off by myself
Yes.
doing my own thing. So it was like, yeah, I would like to go be by myself and do
Mm-hmm.
something for a change. So I ended up getting the preceptor, that program, and doing Ruth Hospice. It was mine, just a mind shift change because I was able to see people that had a life prior to arriving to this point of death,
Mm-hmm.
and that we separate that. We Death is a totally separate event,
Yes.
but then we separate that person from the life that they have lived before, this actually part of the life process
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at individuals and seeing individuals and being there and being supportive to them, and looking through their transitions, and some graceful, some not, that it kind of sparked like an intrigue into like hospice work. I got offered a job, but I didn't know if I was really wanting to go into a hospice space at
Mm-hmm.
that time because I was not even officially a nurse out of nursing school
Yeah.
yet. I wanted to see some guts and gore, whatever else I could experience.
Yeah.
And plus, I had a love for cardiac at the time. So I kind of started my journey in cardiac after I graduated nursing school.
Okay. And so then now you're a nurse, and then what brought you to doula work?
Death brought me
Death.
to do the work. Like in all honesty, my mother that I originally talked about,
Mm-hmm.
she died in 2009. She had a stroke,
Sorry to hear that.
and the experiences that we had with her, my mother was very open
Mm-hmm.
when she would talk about, if something had happened to her and she went into the hospital and thought that she wouldn't make it, if those things happened, she wouldn't want us to do all this. She referred to it as extra stuff, but
Yeah.
when I got into nursing school, I found out the extra stuff meant like tube feeding,
Mm.
breathing tubes and things like that. So it was like, so I got it. And so when she had a stroke, and then in less than 24 hours, they were asking us what did we want to do because she wasn't going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
But her having those conversations actually made the choice easy
Yeah.
because it was more honoring her choices than making the choice for
For
her.
her. Yeah.
And then in 2016, I actually lost my oldest son, Javante Sr. He
Sorry to
um,
hear
he
that.
was murdered, and that experience was that was the one that literally took me to my core,
Mm-hmm.
and not really, having to experience something as traumatic. Even though losing my mom was a trauma,
Yeah.
but something as traumatic as the loss of a child and how he was taken away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, a year later, my grandmother, who was 90 at the time, she passed away. And just from that period of having just a moment of just like reflection, like seeing how we were able to bring her home for her to die at home, like that was an honor to be able to
Yeah.
do that. And not necessarily, it was embracing her life journey and that completion. So I look at these things in different ways. So, like my mother and my son, those were lives that were ended abruptly,
Yeah.
and versus my grandmother, that was like a life cycle being completed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, learning and layering that knowing that death can be traumatic, but it can also be beautiful, and knowing that you can experience that in either any kind of way, in any kind of form. And I started trying to talk to people about life insurance and values of advanced directives because my mom didn't have one, but we had her voice. My son, I talked to him like a week or two prior to dying because he had a son that we wanted to get life insurance for him for something for his son,
Yeah.
but we didn't get a chance to follow up with that because he was taken away.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing community education about that, and my friend was like, I said, I want to be able to do that and like meet with people and talk to
Yeah.
them about, the value of these things, helping them complete these things. And so friends started sending videos. They were just like, you should see this video. You should see this video. And I'm like, who's this video? So like I would glance at it and I was like, all I seen was this black lady, that just had like this beautiful locks. And I was like, I'm not gonna look because I was like, I don't know. Then by the time the third person actually sent me the video, I was like, let me look at this video. And I looked at the video and it was like, oh my God, I want to do what she does. I was like, a death doula? I've never heard of a
Yeah.
death doula. I was like, I really want to do this because it was something about watching her during that clip. Her name is Alua Author.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's with going with grace. Um, and so it was something about her sitting at that table with that client at that time and allowing that client to express her thoughts, her feelings,
Yeah.
and her family being present. And then there was a little one running around, like in the back of this space, but it was just like all these people are going to be affected by
Mm-hmm.
the day that she departs here.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to empower and be that someone that's in the middle of that to help facilitate those things, it was like an amazing thing. So I decided to research that and find out if it was a real thing or did she just like make that up or
Uh-huh.
something, and finding out that this is something that is very real, so it can be referred to as a death doula,
Mm-hmm.
end of life doula, midwife, however they term it and people use it in different terms.
Yeah.
So guides, whatever that may be. So yeah, and I decided that that was something I definitely wanted to do. So I started that journey to become a death doula.
So what was involved in the training of becoming a death doula?
So I ended up researching a bunch of different, because like I said, it was a very real thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up researching a bunch of different trainings. And then there was one that actually resonated with me. And I found it. It was through Lifespan Doula Association, and it was in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I love the one that the fact that they had it, it was in person.
Yeah.
Two, they gave you guidelines like you had to not have experienced a death within a year before going into the training.
Mm.
I love the fact that there was more of the client, is one part of that nucleus, but then they understand the value of, everyone that surrounds that person, as I refer to as a support team,
Yes.
around that person. But all of these people in that circle need to be nurtured in order for them to be able to be there for that person.
Yeah.
So I love the approach that it was a holistic doula approach. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take that trek with me, my youngest son and my grandson, up to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it was a 3 day intensive training, really truly an intensive training, because you had an opportunity to kind of see what your relationship is about death,
Yes.
before you actually kind of go into a space of trying to facilitate and support other people
Mm-hmm.
with that. And it was really, it did something that it took you down to your core about, your perceptions, your feelings, how you would, express that, share that, support other people with that. And it was a group of 25 of us in that space, and we all came from like various different backgrounds. A lot of nurses,
Yeah.
but there were physical therapists, we had a lawyer, we had people who already worked in hospice. There was, I mean, massage therapists, just so many different people from so many different walks to come with this one thing that we all had in common. It was something about that relationship with death and knowing that people needed to be supported through it. So yes, 3 days, totally intensive training. It took a couple like weeks to a month to kind of debrief from
Yes.
all of that
Of course.
before actually getting into a space of wanting to move to wanting to support people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And then so you've taken the training and, like you said, you gave yourself that month to debrief. Then what was it like supporting your first client through that process?
So what I have come to learn through my process that a lot of people, they don't really like to talk about death a whole
Yes.
lot.
I,
So to
yeah.
come into that space, willingly, it's still a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I actually worked with was because they sustained a loss of a loved one, so it was more kind of on the back end,
Yes.
where it was offering more of a grief support
Mm-hmm.
and helping and supporting them through accepting it and starting to integrate your life.
Yeah.
And that is when you start to realize that the relationships that people have with those loved ones, they're impacted by it in such a way. And I talk a lot about a ripple effect. When one life is lost, the ripple effect of how many people are impacted by that.
Yeah.
And so I've dealt with clients who have experienced infant loss. I actually had a client who was supporting someone, and I was actually supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I do have a client that had a life limiting diagnosis that I am supporting. And that experience, really, you really have to start to connect with yourself, because remembering that this is not your personal journey, but it is your journey of that person
Yeah.
and the people that are surrounding them. And it's a lot of reframing different thought processes and helping them see things from a different perspective, because of the fact that we don't talk a lot about death.
Yeah.
If we have a very apprehensive, negative, final,
Yeah.
concept about it, and it's all bad,
Yeah.
you know. So allowing someone to embrace the fact that they're making the choice to live until that transition happens,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that they have the best quality of life in between there is it's important, and that's individually based. So you don't have that ability to, it's not cookie cutter.
Yes.
It's me coming to know you, finding out your fears and your concerns, your thoughts about that. And then my role comes in to help you start to dissect a little bit of that, unlearn some of those things, and learning different ways to approach it.
When do you think it's the best time to consult with a death doula? Because,
Um,
yeah,
Go ahead. You
no,
go ahead.
no, I was going to say because, you've mentioned twice that, they've gotten diagnosis and then sought out. But
Mhm.
when do you feel would be the best time?
There's a lot of different opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one, like I am really a big fan of preparation.
Yes.
So you can connect with a deaf doula if you are looking into getting your advanced directives together. If you're trying to figure out like what things would I need, because we think that death is some this end of life process
Yeah.
after a life is completed, but it's something as simple as going to a grocery store that can cause that change to happen.
Yeah.
Like in our lives we're not guaranteed a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So preparation is really important. And I don't think a lot of people realize that there's value in preparation just because we talk about death. One of my sayings is that you don't have to be dying to talk about death.
Yeah.
You can actually talk about it now.
Yeah.
So that preparation is a really good thing. It's like if you have children, you just, started having children, what do I need to do to make sure if something happens to me
Yes.
that my children are being taken care of? What if I get, start to have chronic health conditions? What do I need to do to make sure that if something happens and changes for me, that I have people to be my voice?
Yeah.
What are my do I need certain documents to be in play? What if I need extra help with questions? Because I'm not really sure, because some of our providers are getting 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes for an appointment, and they're not able to, when you're getting information and it's happening to you real time, it takes some time to absorb and process
Yes.
that. And sometimes when you're getting that, the thought of thinking you're supposed to make a decision right away, is a lot of pressure
Yeah.
when you haven't even processed what's happening. So being able to seek out someone to kind of help filter those things out early on. So I feel like the earlier the better. It is also allows you opportunity creating that rapport and relationship. So you are able to see someone from one place to another. So as they are transitioning, they find safety and security and trust within you when they're becoming their most vulnerable and
Yeah.
they're in their most need. And the same thing with the support team and their family. So the sooner the better.
Yeah.
Absolutely don't hesitate.
Yeah. Some of the things that stood out to me is that you mentioned, we do have um, this very negative association with death. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's only like two cultures that I can think of that really have, well, not really death, but like the Mexican culture has a very um, strong association with death, right? As another
Mm-hmm.
process of life. They celebrate it.
Yes.
They have altars. They keep their
Yes.
loved ones
Yes.
in prayer, in communion
Yes.
constantly. And Spanish cultures to an extent do some sort of that. But when it comes to death preparation, I find that's the hardest to kind of have a conversation beforehand. For
Mm,
example, my dad passed away over 6 years ago as a result of Alzheimer's,
okay.
and when he passed away in another country. He went back home to Panama, and
Okay.
when we got notice of his passing, it was like, well, what's going to be done? Like, I had no
Mm,
idea what his wishes were,
mm,
how we were going to manage that, if anything. And I just knew I had to go. Like,
mm,
I was like, I have to be there. I can't leave him. Him and my mother had been separated for many years, but they never really discussed it. So then I made a choice to have him cremated. And I know for me that was a very hard choice to make
mm.
because I did not know if that was his wishes. And I wanted
Right.
to be able to, just like make sure that he was happy in his final life of
Right.
like that stage of that I took, right? Because then it
Right.
became an issue of like, well, who keeps the ashes? And I just knew that for me that was
Mm,
too much. My nephew
mm,
wound up keeping the ashes, but I feel like it's a hard conversation to have, even with my mother after that. And I asked her wishes. The first words out of most elders' mouth is, "You're trying to put me in the grave,"
mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, no, I want to make
Right.
sure that I do what you want. And
Right.
they they have a hard time just coming to that. This is what I want my life to be. And when my grandmother passed away, it was also challenging. She passed away. The anniversary of her death was the 28th on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And she passed away in 1994.
Okay.
And we had no clue of what she wanted to do, right? There was no conversation. And my grandfather, her husband, passed away 6 months after that. And
Okay.
it was like, again, there was these no conversations, but I just saw how, like you mentioned, having advanced directives, what was going to happen to the land that they've acquired together, what's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen, how the children going to manage the property now that it's been left to
Right.
them. So is will preparation part of the conversation around like what you want to happen to you physically?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is all inclusive
Mm-hmm.
because we have, you have the monetary things, you have the physical things. So like part of like one of those preparation type of sessions is to talk about, like I said, advanced directives. To talk about, your thoughts. First of all, let's talk about the thoughts. Let's not ask you just what you want to
Mm-hmm.
do. Let's talk about your thoughts that are centered around these
Yeah.
options. So, currently here, you can either it's burial or cremation, but
Yeah.
you can do um, a more natural green type of
Yeah.
burial, or you can do, some of the other what we consider to be, in a sense more traditional, the things that you're familiar with. That even though the green burial is actually more traditional, so
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
just gonna say,
Definitely.
but just but let's have a conversation first.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about how you feel. Let's talk about your thoughts because that's we're not going to really you're not going to get to that place
Yes.
of getting to the planning and talking about these things until we start to understand your thoughts and your relationship about death.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about that first. Tell me about, tell me about how do you feel about death? What do you think about death? Who have you had experienced death with? Who have you lost?
Yeah.
What were those experiences like? So to be able to start to make that more relational and bring it because I'm a believer that nothing becomes personal until it's personal.
Yes.
So like it doesn't affect me until it affects me.
Mm-hmm.
So even though people around you are like dying, but until it shows up to you, then it becomes a different thing. So right
Yeah.
now, even though people are close to them are dying, it's still not you.
Yes.
So to still to come back and have those conversations to people, it's just like, no, because it's not me and I'm not, I don't want to think about or talk about that because it what you kind of like mentioned and think about the thing you say like it's death like you're manifesting death or something and
Yes.
it's like you're not manifesting death because as we try to refer back to biblical teachings is that like we have no control, we don't know
Yeah.
when things are going to end for us. So why not what would be the punishment in preparation? What would be the difficulty? And the difficulty is that we don't talk about these things.
Yeah.
So let's first have a conversation of how you feel and what you think and start to unravel that so then we can bring that in and then start to talk about what your choices would be and what that would look like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And then, so you also mentioned too that you started doing cafes, like death
Death
cafes.
cafes.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your death cafes and
So
it, with how it started, um, how it's going, what the conversations, what the feedback is around them.
yeah. As you can tell, I'm
Yeah,
excited.
yeah.
I do. So in the process of trying to research becoming a deaf doula, I kept someone deaf when you would Google death, of course. So
Yes.
Deaf Cafe kept coming up, and I was like, I don't know what that is, and I'm not gonna look at it right now because of the fact that I know that I'm a person who in my mind, I have a really big plate.
Yes.
So I have room to put more things on this plate all the time. And the plate can grow, but the
Mm-hmm.
things don't ever come off the plate. So I was like, I'm not going to look at this because if I do, then I'm probably going to put one more thing on my
Yes.
plate that I want to really just truly focus on trying to become the deaf doula. So I
Yeah.
was like, skip that, don't look at it. But then it kept showing up. And I do believe that when things keep resurfacing in your life, it's something that you need to, pay attention to or
Yeah.
address. So I was like, okay, let me look at this. So it's like John Underwood is actually the founder of Death Cafe, and this was over in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to read about it, and one of the things that I thought was so amazing was like what I refer to as the
Yes.
underpinning of the Death Cafe. When people think, oh, we're just going to talk about death and dying, da da da, and it's just like, no, it's actually the underpinning and like the mission is for you to start to become aware of the finiteness of your life,
Yes.
that you start to think like, oh my God, so I'm 30, you know, like, what do I need to do with my life? How do I make my life, be of value
Yeah.
for myself? Do I leave something behind? What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm leaving footprints here on the earth, like, what am I leaving?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Did I take that trip today that, did I decide to do something because I'm waiting? We live in a society that we're always waiting for,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to do something, to live. So it's like, but what if that what we're waiting for doesn't happen?
Yeah.
And then so the things and the opportunities that we don't get to take in life, we don't take them because we're waiting for something to happen before we do. Or when I get older, or when I retire, or when I do these things, and it's like, no, but you have, health and like physical abilities now. Try to do them now,
Yeah.
and maybe not on the scale that, that you think that you should be doing things on, but just like being grateful and embracing life currently for what
Yeah.
it is and living it and just making it a good quality for whatever that looks like for you. So yeah, so I love the underpinning, and I was like, I would love to do that. And so started trying to shop around for different coffee shops and locations of places, and like, hey, made a little flyer, and I was like, my name is Chantel. I'm want to know if you would be willing to share space so I can, I wanted to do what's called a death cafe. And then the facial expressions
I can
was
imagine.
already telling you that people were not buying into this. And it was like, it's like, and then I try to give them a little bit of explanation, but then I understand that, the term death is like,
Yes.
when it's really not,
Yes.
So it was like, I'll give you a little bit of reading, and maybe I'll follow up with you. And there were some people I know, I'm like, no, I'm not going to follow up with
Yes.
you because you're
Mm-hmm.
already looking at me like this is not happening. I'm going to
Yes.
leave it alone.
Exactly.
And so I actually met someone who allowed me to host the first one in their
Mm-hmm.
space. Um, and, I was just like super excited because I'm like, but I don't know if people want to talk about death. So I know that people aren't really going to show up. And I remember one lady walking through the door, and we still have a connection to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And she walked in, and she's just like, so what made you want to do this? And how did you get into them? Like, okay. And so like I give her the
Yes.
story and everything. And so like I said, we have a connection because she was also a death midwife. And she's like, I have some people that you really should meet. And I was like, she's like, you should really be interested in becoming. I said, I am doing the training next
Yes.
month, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be 3 years for Death Cafe in July, actually, from when I
Wonderful.
did my first one. So it's been an amazing space. COVID has changed that format
Mm-hmm.
from being face to face to being more of a virtual setting. But the blessing about that is that it allows accessibility to people who
Yes.
typically probably would not have had access to it.
Exactly. More people
So
can come and not
yeah,
just in
yeah.
your
So
area.
I thought that was actually, yeah, I've had like people from Hungary, come on. And it's just like, I'm always obsessed with time,
Yes.
time differences when I meet
Mm-hmm.
people from other countries. I'm like, what time is it where you are? It's like I do this time check in.
Yes.
But the conversations, because of the fact that one of the, if I say rules about Death Cafe, is that you cannot have an agenda. You have to let the conversations basically unfold organically.
Yes.
So I typically start by asking everyone what brought them to Death Cafe. And so it could be death, it could be the fact that I know that I'm getting older, and, me approaching that, and how do I approach that? I'm single and I don't have children. So what do I need to do?
Yeah.
I have been mourning already, the loss of a parent before they even died. Now they
Mm-hmm.
died. So now, I feel different about this process. Should I feel guilty about this?
Yeah.
Having conversations with older family members about, death, and just like yeah, it unfolds in such a way, people finding out about deaf doulas for the first time
Yeah.
during Death Cafe. And so just like, and people asking about resources and what's available out there to them to help them with this. And we talk about the funeral industry and how, we have funeral directors that come, and I'm like, I have personal feelings about the funeral industry and how
Yeah.
it is a business and how it's
Mm-hmm.
a vulnerability on people
Yeah.
during that moment, and not being a sales pitch, but like really, this is a vulnerable moment for people. So preparation can help eliminate that coming to someone's doorstep with the absolute need, and not being able to be that consumer in death the way that you are consumer in life.
Exactly.
So yeah, the conversations are just, they're thought provoking. People have done things after attending a death cafe, be it like having conversations with their families, started to get advanced directives. And it's just a beautiful thing, especially when you have people who come back and say, yeah, I talked to my family about this. And it's like, oh my God, it's so This is it.
Yeah.
This is why. So yes.
Well, that's great. And then, so is it a process that they can go through, like, getting an advance directive? Do they need to get a lawyer? What is entailed in that?
No, so I have actually been trained to support people with completing advanced directives.
Hmm.
I drove up to Green Bay, Green Bay Packers, Lambeau Field, like literally the place that I went training. I could look out the window and see Lambeau Field.
Oh, wow.
Um, but so I've done training to be able to meet with people to help them choose like their person that will be their voice, that will advocate for them, and what that looks like. So just because I have a spouse, that doesn't automatically obligate that spouse to be the decision maker for me.
Hmm.
Just because I have children, it doesn't have to flow in the relationship of the oldest child
Yeah.
being the one to facilitate that. So being able to choose whoever your power of attorney person is going to be. There's different types. You have your advanced directives, so it's that person choosing that person, and then also like what they'll be responsible for,
Hmm.
and then there's like your living will. So if you have a life, it's a possibility that you may not, return to the quality of level of life, or death becomes imminent, that there's different things that you would like or for them to not do. So there's a different form for that. So advanced directives comes under, it's that big term.
Hmm.
And then there's power of attorney for healthcare, there's living wills, there's durable power of attorney for health, for finances.
Yeah.
So there's these other different things. So helping people understand and navigate and how to make the best decision for them, understanding that these documents are not like once you sign it today. Like I told, I explain to people, I'm like, you may fall out with so and so at the barbecue, and now you don't want that person to
Yeah.
make these life changing decisions for you. You
Exactly.
can change that decision. You can change who you want to be that person. As relationships and dynamics change, you can do that. And then also facilitating the conversations with the person that's designated to be that person, and making sure that they understand that role as well. And are they comfortable with taking on that role? Because, like I said, just
Yeah.
because a family orders in a relationship doesn't necessarily say that there's an obligation to do so.
This is fascinating. And it really is, because what comes to mind is that, we prepare for everything else in life. We prepare for college. We prepare for marriage. We prepare to buy that new car, buy that house. The one thing we don't prepare for is death. And it can be simpler if we just make those connections and
Yes,
do it in advance. And like you said,
yes,
not knowing that it's not finite. Just because I chose you today doesn't mean that you have to be that person. Or
right,
if something happens in that person's life where they turn around and then come to you and say, I can't do this anymore.
right. Hmm.
Also being able to choose someone else. But
Right.
I like the idea of having the entire family involved, so everyone
Hmm.
can hear,
Yes.
what
Yes.
decisions need to be made, and how they
Yes.
came to those decisions, where it's not this dynamic of, like you mentioned, the older child making the
Hmm.
decision and
No.
feeling like, someone's voice wasn't represented in that, or
Yes.
trusting,
Yes.
can I
Yes.
trust what you say is true,
Right.
as a thing as well. So it sounds like, I know for me as a birth doula,
Hmm.
it's a lot. It's a heavy load sometimes to take on,
Hmm.
being that person and supporting families through this. How do you take care of you with
So
all of this?
I meditate.
Okay.
My heavy rotational books is something that I find pleasure and joy in. Um I do debrief.
Okay.
You know,
Hmm. And what does
I
debriefing
actually
look like for you?
so debriefing means like sometimes I'll write notes. I have therapy.
Yeah.
So I do, but for the most part, like even if like I come home, just kind of having just a little bit of a moment to kind of reflect on, what took place earlier. And then just like knowing that, did I give my best? Did I support them? Are there things that I feel like I can approach them with next time?
Yeah.
And like make these little notes for myself, but then after I'm done with that, to leave it there,
Okay.
to definitely leave it there and to be able to pick it up again when, that is not something that I'm swirling with it 24/7.
Yes.
because, I still have myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am co-parenting with my grandson's mother, my son that I lost, to help raise my 6-year-old grandson. So, I have two sons, surviving sons as well. So, like I said, but the biggest thing on top of that is that I have myself,
Yes.
because I have to be in a place to be able to provide and be supportive to everyone, clients, and my loved ones as well. So, and yeah, I do yoga. I spend time in nature. I nurture friendships that I have that are very valuable to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, sometimes it's just dancing in the middle of the floor, singing
Yeah.
songs. I actually have a blog that I just reconnected with, that sharing parts of my life journey,
That's
to
wonderful.
just remind people that they are not alone
Yeah.
in this life, are things that I find joy with. So yeah, that's what I do.
That's great. That's great. And so I want to backtrack 1 second before we move forward
Absolutely.
into the next. But when someone is contracting you for services,
Mhm.
um, can you describe a little bit of your packages or how that
Yes.
works?
So I do, there's like a la carte services. So it kind of depends on the client. So I
Okay.
do a free consultation.
Hmm.
So we can kind of figure out what you actually would benefit from,
Okay.
at that time. And then I currently offer kind of like, there's three different types of things that I do. So there's, not do, but offer. So, I have one package that it is available. So I do things like I allow you like a 2 hour respite. So for their support, especially if it's a primary caregiver to that person,
Hmm.
to be able to offer respite to them, because I do understand that you also need to be full and nurtured and supported in order for you to be able to provide what you need to do for that loved one. I do like actual visits, so I do virtual visits or face to face visits, whatever you are comfortable with. I give you an opportunity to do like a legacy project, or we will write your obituary. We will determine, like I said, kind of like what do you want to do, cremation or burial. We discuss
Yeah.
those thoughts and those feelings about that. I will, I like personally will contact like funeral homes to be able to get rates and things like that for you, so you can make the most informed decision as possible.
Hmm.
I do like meditation and sound therapy with my clients and their support team, to make sure that they stay, nurtured within their soul, and giving them that opportunity to balance. We, yeah, I offer resources to them. So whatever I want to function in the world role of, I want to be that person to help with this imbalance of what's happening with life, to create a balance for you so you can be present and you can be available through this process, and not having to worry about those little details. So I'm your little detail person,
Okay.
to just make sure that you are, we're covering those things that are, when we get to that point of the departure, that we're not trying to run and put all of these things together. Like I currently, right now, I've had the client that I'm working with, we have done videos for his children, so they will be able to have these things after their once he's departed.
Yeah.
um so it's a beautiful thing to be able to share. And what I've learned just from working with them is that it gives them that continuation of having purpose,
Yeah.
that they're doing something and giving something, and they're not just here in this space like dying.
Yeah.
Is what a lot of people think, like I'm just dying. And it's just like, no, you're living.
You're
You're
living.
living,
Exactly.
but it may look different. So yeah. And then I do grief support. So like I said, for people who have lost people already and they need support with helping, like I said, integrating what had happened to what their life is currently moving in the direction of, in different ways of like how to honor, how to support, how to get through that first, year, that anniversary, whatever that may be, offering them resources, trying to connect them to therapists, whatever they may need. So, and just being that person and understanding that I'm not there with judgment, that I'm there to create space and hold space for you to be able to share all those vulnerable, raw feelings that you may have, to help you go through that process.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you do. It's so needed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my next segment is going to be a
Mm-hmm.
little lighter.
Okay.
It's what I like to call daily inspiration.
Okay.
What brings you joy?
watching my grandson be this free spirit who like is openly expressing himself, being able to like nurture, feeling nurtured, feeling safe, feeling supported so he can explore and grow
Hmm.
versus, right now we're in, I know we said light, but a little bit of heaviness that,
Yes.
he's a young black male and just dealing with, what we see in society right now, facing, our black men that,
Hmm.
allowing him to create a space where he can be liberated, he can be free, that,
Yes.
he can take up space. We
Yes.
are teaching him to take up space. We are teaching him that he matters, that he has value. So to watch him just step into that and be existing in that, that brings me joy. He challenges my soul sometimes,
Oh,
but
yes.
it brings me
I
joy.
totally understand. I'm in the same frame when I was raising my son of like he has a voice.
Hmm.
He matters. He has
Yes,
autonomy. He has a
yes,
say in what happens and what
yes,
and
yes,
that does bring up
yes.
things for you because I was raised I'm the youngest of three.
Okay.
And so I'm the baby. So I didn't have a lot of the same restrictions as my sisters claim to have
Hmm.
had, in the sense of I always had a voice. And
Hmm.
so I could always say and do things outside of what was considered normal, like, so
Yes.
things that weren't supposed to be said, I said it.
Yeah.
So raising
Yeah.
my son to be able to say those same things and feel those same
Hmm.
ways, it does at
Yes.
times push your buttons because it does.
Yes.
You kind of go, ooh, that stung a little, right? And it brought up
Yes.
something. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from because and you have to
Yes.
kind of check yourself and take a minute.
Yes.
I used to have to count to 5 and be like, okay, what is this bringing up for me? Because it's not him, it's me.
Yes.
It's always me.
Yes.
It's not him.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
I
So
that's a
that
beautiful thing.
for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah.
And
What's your favorite scent?
lemongrass.
Ooh.
Lemongrass, lemongrass, lemongrass. I love lemongrass. Like
Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
yeah, I have a whole nother business that I do holistic products and things like that and offer services through. Because I'm a yoga teacher too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I did an herbal apprenticeship and I found out about lemongrass and it is my life. I Yeah, so a lot of the products that I make, herbal salt soaks and things like
Uh-huh.
that, have lemongrass as one of those uplifting type of, energizing types of smells that it's just, I love it. I
Yeah.
do. I have a rollerball blend that, sometimes I'll just sit there and just sniff.
That's good. I mean, everything that it sounds very grounding, right? Of just
Yeah,
like
yes.
we need that,
Creating a
especially
balance. Creating
exactly,
a balance.
especially now, right?
Yes,
Because it is very challenging. We're in very
yes.
challenging times. Um, my next question is, what's a quote or saying that inspires you?
So, okay, so one of the books that I'm reading,
Mm-hmm.
All About Love by Bell Hooks.
I love bell hooks.
So I've got my wish list of books that with her name on it that I
Mm-hmm.
really need in my library,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm on book buying,
Yes.
restrictions right
Yes.
now. So until I finish another book.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I, I
so
I I get you on that too because I
yeah,
have like 20 books
yes,
that I haven't
yes,
read, and yeah, I can't buy anymore. Yeah,
yes. They're in my wish list though. I put them
okay.
in the Amazon wish list all
Mm-hmm.
the time. So there was a what I call close the book moment. So those are the moments when I read something and I have to sit with it. So I close the book. There's no more reading any further with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a close the book moment because I deal with anxiety. And so like a lot of things are like I'm thinking and overthinking and fearing and all of that. And so one part of the chapter, I can't remember it was, but she said, your fear may not go away, but it will not get in the way.
Mm.
And literally it did. It was like, close the book. Let's sit with this right here because that right there is about to be a game changer because I literally sat in a space of always trying to get over fear to
Yes.
do something and realizing that I was still stagnant or still in like I could not move because I have to get over the fear first.
Yeah.
Let me get over the fear. Like it
Yeah.
was something to get over. And I read that and realized that I may not ever get over that. But I have to go through it
Yeah.
anyway and do it anyway. So I do a lot of things afraid.
Yeah.
My intention is to do them afraid until I'm no longer afraid.
Oh.
And so it's So that's my own quote. How about that?
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. It's true. Fear is very debilitating and
Yes.
can be very binding. And
Yes.
it's one of the things that, my son has taught me to be fearless in certain
Yes.
ways
Yes.
because
Yes.
I did not want him to grow up with fear like I grew up with fear,
Mm-hmm.
in the same ways. And I did a lot of things when he was younger, afraid. Like
Yes.
we went zip lining,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Yes.
afraid of
Awesome.
heights. I do
Mm-hmm.
not like heights. We've done it twice. And
Mm-hmm.
when I tell you, I'm like nervous and shaking because I want him to see that you can still do things when
Mm-hmm.
you're afraid. Like it should not
Mm-hmm.
stop you. And I did some
Yes.
terrifying things afraid. We went when we went ziplining in Jamaica, and we also went around this. They have this bobsled that goes around the top of a mountain, and you are in charge of how fast or slow it goes. And you know how like any
Really?
kind of like a roller coaster ride, and they take your picture.
Yes.
I was like, my face was like, he was thrilled, but I thought I was gonna die. But I was like, I want him to know that, I'm not fearless. Like I'm
Yes.
human,
Yes.
and I'll
Yes.
do it afraid. So
Yes.
that is a good one. That is a
Yes.
really good
Thank
one.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And my next segment is birth story. If you would like to share a birth story, yeah,
Yes.
I know you have.
So, my oldest son, and this is and I'm really wanting to share part of this story, and
Yeah.
I'll now
Mm-hmm.
have to fast forward how we got to my youngest son
Okay.
and that birth story and how that went totally. So I was 16 when I was pregnant with my
Mm-hmm.
oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of life that we don't know about at 16?
Yeah.
About that much. But we think we
But
know
we
that
think we know
much.
this much.
Yeah. So I'm like, so that it was an experience that it was actually kind of traumatic
Of
because
course.
you have no clue what you're about to experience,
No.
with this, and because there's more of because of the stigma and
Yes.
like there's like this enfranchisement because of being a teenage parent, like
Mm-hmm.
you don't get like there's no fanfare and celebration,
No.
about you bringing a child into this world. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like that's like even though that's your first kind of like relationship of the shame and guilt that
Yes.
comes into play, with being a teen parent. So these experiences you don't necessarily get to enjoy, learn about, talk about, express, and things like that. So I know it was less than 5 hours that I was in labor with this whole little person, and
Mm-hmm.
and just like it was like this thing that just went,
Yeah.
you know, quickly. And still not really, like these moments. Next thing you know, you see a whole little person. It was like a whole bunch of pain, and then a person,
Yeah.
and didn't know what my choices were and my options were.
Mm-hmm.
So my middle son, that was like a whole separate situation. I was 18 when I had him, and that was first time experiencing what a NICU
Oh,
was about, but yet still being a teenager.
yeah.
No one's really
Talking with
engaging
you.
you and understanding my mental emotional
Mm-hmm.
abilities, and how to prepare and be in these types of spaces. And now I'm being a parent to two children
Yeah.
and still trying to grow up myself. And then I was 25 when I had my youngest son, and I knew by that time there were going to be no more children coming out of here. And I was like, it is a wrap. We are going to shut all of this down because three is the magic number. Two was a magic number, but three became all of them were a blessing. But I learned more things as I got older.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm enjoying this pregnancy. I was like, I am going to embrace this. I mean, let's get the hair done, the nails done. Let's, wear
Mm-hmm.
things that
Mm-hmm.
I normally wouldn't wear because the first two pregnancies consist of jogging suits and whatever my son's father had at the time. Like I'm
Yeah.
wearing that. But like now it's like, nope, let me dress nicely. Let me embrace this.
Mm-hmm.
Let me embrace this pregnancy because if this is really going to be the last one, we are going to do this, in the way that I envision and I see.
Yeah.
And the support that came around me with that was a very beautiful thing. And it wasn't just like through my family, it was like friends, families, and things like that. And I did like birthing classes. with my best friend at the time. He was very supportive. He was actually there for the birth of my youngest son.
Mhm.
um, and just going through that whole process of like understanding, like, I'm bringing life,
Yeah.
into this world, and I am nurturing and growing life. And, I was like, I don't want payment, like, I want to be able to do, have this experience and fully be present in this experience. And going through the delivery and like the birth afterwards was just, it was a challenging but a very beautiful experience.
Mhm.
And just like knowing that, from reflecting back when I had my first two children, of how um, your role of being a birthing doula, and being able to open and expand that
Yeah.
to people is absolutely necessary, especially when we don't feel like we rely on our providers to
Yeah.
make the decision maker for us,
Mhm.
and not including us sometimes with the decisions that
Yeah.
would need to be made. And so being able to feel like I cried after my OB, delivered my baby, because of the relationship that we had,
Mhm.
because he really truly made me feel like I mattered and this was important,
Oh,
you
wow.
know. And
Yeah.
so, it was just like, it was a beautiful experience. So, you know, part of that, and just like advocating, one of my friends like, do you have a doula? You need a doula. She was in Atlanta at the time. And I'm like, you need to, I was like Googling, like, no, we need to find one for her, because she gonna need somebody to help her with this. And just realizing that there's a value in, this consistency. And like, I like it from the end that I do it,
Yeah.
because there's something about having the continuity and the consistency of a person. Like, my best friend was that person for me
Yeah.
through my pregnancy.
Yeah.
So, people in that role of being able to provide that continuity, because you're seeing providers,
Mhm.
you're seeing staff when you're only seeing them for the first time because you don't know them when you come into the hospital.
Yes.
But there's some ease of having that presence of that continuity of that person who has followed you through that process, and being able to look to them for that support and advocating for you and everything. So that was a beautiful experience. The last one, um, don't plan on doing it again. And, and then that gave me something that I take away with when I work with people who have had experienced perinatal loss,
Yeah.
because of that preparation. Like, my business, the tagline is, making the departure as significant as the arrival,
Yes.
because of the fact that we spend so much time preparing for someone we have not met yet,
Mhm.
and then having that ending happen before you actually get a chance to meet them.
Yeah.
And, feeling like, do I mourn this because I never met them, because they weren't a full person? It's just like, they were there,
Yeah.
they were there.
They were
So
there. Mhm.
just, yeah. So the experiences that I've experienced help cultivate, me into the person that I am, to be able to share that and kind of relate to people
Yeah.
and through their experiences, but not injecting my experiences to them.
Exactly. That was
Yeah.
those all of those stories were so beautiful. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you and
Thank you. Thank
thank you for
you.
sharing that with me.
Thank
It's
you.
really I'm really excited. I love that tagline, making the ending as significant as the beginning, right? That's
Yeah,
what you said.
making the
Make
departure
making
as
the
significant as
departure,
the arrival.
making the
Yes.
departure as significant as the arrival.
Yes.
That's incredible. That's
Yes.
really incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your time and your
Thank
experience. This is
you.
so valuable. I'm so honored to have met you and glad
I
that we
know.
connected. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. I am grateful for you for
Yeah.
reaching out and just sharing the space with me
Oh,
today.
definitely. I
Really.
think it's
Yeah.
important. I mean, I couldn't be a doula and not think that all types of doula work is not important. And when I
Yes.
found out about death doulas, I was like, I need to know more. And I know everyone needs to know more about this as
Yes.
well
Yes.
because,
I feel like they think we don't exist.
yes, and I think
And
that is
then,
true. Yeah.
yes, and then if they find out, they're like, how do I find you?
Yes.
How do I find them? How do I get connected to them? So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Oh, thank
time.
you.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I am. I'm about to do, well, I have a client that I'm in contact with because there's a change in condition right
Okay.
now. But other than that, I'm basking in just taking each moment at a time this
That
weekend.
that is all we can do.
Yeah.
That is all we
So
can do.
gratitude to you
Oh,
for
thank
what you
you.
do,
Thank you.
and creating this platform to
Yeah.
share. So, and you have a beautiful weekend as
Thank you.
well.
You too. You
Thank
too. We'll
you.
talk soon. I'll send you, I
All
will
right.
talk again before the episode gets
Okay.
released.
Okay.
All right. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You're
Enjoy.
welcome.
All right. Bye bye.